Uh, as Chihe, our colleague, has mentioned, I would like to provide you a refresh, an overview of PCB's elimination network as it is established a few years ago. As part of parties' obligations, parties to the Stockholm Convention, based on the Convention Annex A Part 2, that all equipment and oils containing PCBs shall be eliminated from use by 2025 and manage them under environmentally sound waste management by 2028. But many developing countries and countries with economies in transition have encountered many obstacles in implementing the environmentally sound management of PCB oils and equipment, including lack of capacities of national resources and poor inventories practices or methodology, and also as well as limited resources and limited access to information, or even inaccessible information. That's why, with regard or considering these problems, then the Stockholm Convention Conference of Parties, with its decision SE4 number 5, initiated establishment of a collaborative framework to promote and facilitate information exchange and to support delivery of the obligations of Stockholm Convention on the environmentally sound management of PCBs. And following that decision, a voluntary arrangement was established, and it's called PCBs Elimination Network, which was established in order to facilitate information exchange among stakeholders and to improved coordination and cooperation among stakeholders with regard to the environmentally sound management of PCBs. And there are various efforts in environmentally sound management of PCBs underway throughout the world, and also various donor countries, including funding institutions, NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, and other international organizations, have demonstrated support to developing countries and countries with economies in transition in order to enable them implement the obligations of the Stockholm Convention. And these efforts need facilitation for better coordination. So PEN aims at harmonizing and coordinating activities and facilitating information exchange by means of, among others, developing clearinghouse mechanism of the Stockholm Convention, which is intended as information portal or hub, and to facilitate linkages between members and promote local networking. And other activities were intended to promote the Stockholm Convention implementation, especially in environmentally sound management of PCBs. The current activities of PEN, mainly development of guidance documents on the environmentally sound management of PCBs, specifically the development of guidance for conducting PCBs inventories, as well as guidance for conducting maintenance of PCBs equipment and facilities. And to disseminate this work of PEN, PEN has conducted webinars first webinars for disseminating the guidance for inventories, which was held in last month, May, and this week the guidance for PCBs maintenance and facilities. Maintenance of PCBs equipment and facilities, which was conducted in Spanish last Tuesday and today in English. The webinar on maintenance of PCBs equipment and facilities stemmed for the fact that PCBs can be used in existing equipment until 2025. So we still have a considerable amount of time until the elimination of the use of PCBs and until the ultimate destruction and disposal of PCBs by 2028. But on the contrary, most parties also still have considerable stocks of in-use and out-of-use equipment containing PCBs. So it is important that all PCBs equipment be handled in environmentally sound manner to avoid danger to human health and the environment from leakage and accidents, and also to avoid contamination of sites and cross-contamination of formerly PCB-free equipment. With that background, this webinar is aimed at raising the awareness of owners of PCBs contaminated equipment, as well as concerned workers, on the environmentally sound maintenance of PCBs contaminated equipment, and also to try to provide guidance to parties on how to handle PCBs in an environmentally sound manner, in particular avoiding cross-contamination. Should you need more information, please visit the indicated webpage or contact myself at dadan.wardana@gmail.org. Now I'll give back the ball to Chihe, and I would like also to thank especially Ms. Ana Ortiz Salazar from Costa Rica for her kind willingness to contribute to this webinar, and who also has developed guidance for PCBs maintenance. I hope this webinar will be useful to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dadan, for your presentation. I'll take the ball back to me. And now I would like to pass the ball to our second presenter, Ms. Ana Ortiz.
Good morning or good afternoon, whichever one of the two. It is a pleasure for me to present this presentation, and I hope it contributes even in a little bit to solving some of our upcoming problems and existing problems on avoiding cross-contamination. Where does the possibility of cross-contamination start? It begins with the PCB inventory. When we have equipment out of service, is only one part of the problem. The other possibility is the equipment that's in service and is out being used and is brought in for maintenance operations. This constitutes the second element of a possible cross-contamination problem. How does cross-contamination occur? There are a few ways, but basically one initial way is that when we replace oil in transformers with new oil without having tested it previously to see if the transformer has PCB contamination, the new oil will automatically become contaminated. The reason for this is that the inner parts of the transformer, the wooden cardboard um, elements of the core of the transformer, are very porous, and they absorb and maintain the PCB contaminated oil even though you drain the transformer. So if you don't properly test the transformer before you put the clean oil in to verify whether or not it has PCB contamination, well, once you put the oil in, the clean mineral oil, well, the porous parts will blend in, the oil will come out of the porous parts, and it will blend in and be a source of cross-contamination. Another form is that if you have you have equipment such as that you use in maintenance tasks, such as hydraulic pumps, hoses, drums, tools, or valves that you do not isolate and keep away from other maintenance operations, and they have been used with PCB contaminated oil. But the oil that remains inside of these valves and the inside of the drums and everything will be contaminated again. Will contaminate the clean oil if we use these equipment for use with clean mineral oil. So we must remember that a small volume of PCB contaminated oils is enough to contaminate large volumes of mineral oil to concentrations above 50 parts per million. We must remember also, and this is a little trick of rule of thumb, is that if you have small concentrations, let's say you have an oil with 5 ppm, and you have another batch of oil that has 10 ppm, and you have another one that has 15 ppm. If you mix those oils together, the volume will increase, but your concentrations will add up. So if you have 5 and you have 10 and you have 6, now you will have 21 parts per million in concentration. So even if you have your oils separated from clean mineral oil, but internally you do not handle your oils correctly, you may produce much higher concentrated contaminated oils. Another form of cross-contamination is when we take contaminated equipment and the oils to scrap dealers, to smelting companies. In many countries, the equipment, the transformers, are drained and they are given or sold to smelting companies. If it's previous to this, a check to see if the transformer has had contaminated PCBs oil, even if it has been drained, the smelting companies will be producing dioxins and furans in their smelting process because the oil will be included still in the core parts, and the temperatures at which the smelting is done are not high enough to be able to eliminate correctly the PCBs inside of the core, inside of the core porous parts. And also, most smelters have very low air emissions controls. So it's important. And also, if we send it to use oil burners in many countries, in my region, in Latin America, and I know in other regions, they are using oil burners, use dielectric oil for different activities. And once again, dioxin interference will be produced if they're not checked properly to be sure that they do not have PCB concentrations. How and where can we avoid cross-contamination? It can be avoided. It can be avoided, and the forms of doing it are really not quite difficult. It's a matter of keeping control of your maintenance situation, your maintenance task. First of all, out-of-service equipment should be placed in storage areas with proper labeling. And I please ask your forgiveness that some of these labels are in Spanish. And I would like to credit and thank the Costa Rican National Light Company, who has been so kind to offer me the possibility of taking these updated pictures. This first one As you will see, the labeling, it says material contaminated with PCBs by polychlorinated biphenyls. This is a label that should go on the storage in a visible place on the storage area. The second is that none of the components of out of service equipment or in service equipment should be used as spare parts in other equipment if the transformers or the capacitors or the equipment haven't been identified with PCB content. If you take a piece from one and use it on a clean PCB-free transformer, you will be possibly transporting contamination from one transformer to the other. The electrical maintenance units, people in the field, people who are handling these will become hotspots and should be properly managed to avoid any possibility of cross-contamination. Later on, we will see some of the things that we need to have present when we're working in the field or doing maintenance tasks to be sure not to have a source of cross-contamination. The equipment that's taken out of service for maintenance should be separated until it has been checked for PCB content. Many times we have lots of equipment that have been taken out of service, and we need to do a first check for them to update our inventory and also to identify which transformers are PCB contaminated and which are not. And here in this picture, the sign, what it says is in the label, it says that these equipment have been taken out of the system. They have been taken out of the service and they are pending to be checked. Another step is to properly use personal protective equipment in specially designated areas for testing. We need to have goggles or glasses. We need to have gloves. In some instances, a Tyvek suit will be necessary, but if it's just for the sampling, it may not be necessary. The equipment must be sampled with the proper personal protection equipment and in specially designated areas that are isolated or in a specially marked off area within the maintenance workshop. Here we have a sign that says area for PCB testing. The first initial step to testing should be, or the least expensive one at this point, and it works as a initial screening, is the chlorine oil kit. It can be used to determine whether or not there's a concentration above 50 parts per million. This kit will not tell you what concentration you have if you do have PCB concentration. It'll tell you if it's above 50 parts per million. Now, with the kit, we must remember a few things that have been experiences or lessons learned over the past few years with respect to the use of the kit. The kit, it will not give you a false negative, which is very good. If you have a negative result, well, then this will tell you that you do not have oil contaminated above 50 parts per million of PCB. It doesn't tell you that the oil doesn't have PCB. It just tells you that the concentrations are below 50 parts per million. There are other kits that have different concentration limits, like 20, but what is most commonly used in the field are the above 50 parts per million, because in many countries, 50 parts per million is the lower limit for characterizing a oil to be contaminated or not with PCBs. Now, if you do get a positive result, if it does give you a result indicating that there's a potential possibility that the concentration is above 50 parts per million, well, the recommended practice is that you do chromatographic analysis. This will define with more exactness if it really is above 50 parts per million and what concentration you have. Now, why is this so important? Although I am well aware that chromatographic lab analysis is expensive in most countries, is that we have had several positive results, false positives, Why the false positives? Because many times when the oil sample has water content or it has soil content, and these added elements can sometimes make the result positive, and it isn't really positive. It is not above 50 parts per million. There have been many cases where when it goes to chromatographic lab analysis, it does not result to be above 50 parts per million. Those equipment that have been passed through the screening with the chlorinol kit and have proven to be positive and are pending chromatographic laboratory testing should be isolated also, because these are still potentially contaminated. They may not be contaminated, but they most likely will be contaminated. And here we have a label, a sign for the area that says pending chromatographic, which means they were pending to be sent to a lab. Equipment used that has come in contact with contaminated oil must also be labeled accordingly and stored separately. All the work that you do with the protective materials should be isolated, but all tasks should be done with these protective materials. As in this first picture, we have secondary containment trays where you may put your drums, or you put the transformer inside of a secondary containment tray. And the same the cases that you don't have a tray on hand, the best thing might be to put a plastic lining with some absorbent material on the sides, in order to, if there is a spill, that you may be able to contain it with the absorbent material, and have it on hand just in case. As you can see here, we have the secondary containment. We have in different containers where the material, the contaminated material, is placed once it's out of use. The equipment, the oils that are used in the maintenance process for refilling of transformers should be also labeled correctly. For instance, the second picture from the left to the right, we have a label that says new oil, and it has the different icons here. This oil, it is very clear that cannot be used. You cannot put hoses or anything into this used oil. This new oil, this is virgin oil. If you're not sure that that equipment has not come into contact with PCB contaminated oils. The second one says recyclable oil. This is oil that is PCB free, has been taken out of other transformers, and has probably gone through a regenerating process and can be used for refilling of clean transformers. And the third drum and the third icon label, what it says is that waste oil. This is oil that has been proven to be contaminated and it cannot be used anymore. In some countries, there is a regenerating process for oils. And the regenerating process, what it does is it extracts humidity and impurities and soil from the oils, and they're reused as the electric oils. Now, this is very important that when you do the regenerating process, that the testing is done prior to including oil in any part of the regenerating process, so as not to contaminate large volumes of oil that, once regenerated, can be reused without any worry. So this is something that we must keep in mind in the regeneration of oils. Labeling. So now we've gone through that separation, identification, and now labeling is an important part of avoiding cross-contamination. In and out of service equipment need proper identification, whether it's labeled or it's potentially contaminated equipment, whether it is determined that it's PCB contaminated or it's potentially contaminated equipment, in order to avoid not cross-contamination. This transformer in the picture has been proven with the kit that it does not have above 50 parts per million of PCB contamination, and that's why the label "No PCB" has been put on it. And it has its, the serials or the numbers for the following for the keeping track of the information. Now, this is very important because the transformers that come into the maintenance areas and they're in service and they're just being brought down to do maintenance for some reason, and there is no leakage, there is no areas where there might be rust accumulated or something. It's not potentially going to be taken out of service quickly. Can continue to be used until 2025. It's very difficult for companies to just eliminate PCB contaminated transformers if they still have a lifespan that needs to be eliminated, and also the process for repurchasing another transformers. So they can go out to service again, but it's important for them to be labeled. It's important for the information to be kept tracked on a database or on an Excel sheet or whatever. So you know and you identify where the transformer is, where it's located, it has its label, and you can keep track of it once it comes down again for maintenance or when it's time to take it out of service. Some of the useful labels for identifying PCB contaminated equipment are these. They're easily purchased, or you can print them, you can download them nowadays, and it's very useful for different forms of identifying. This is a label that's interesting, and I'm sorry that it's in Spanish, but what the label has, we can translate the label if possible, but you can probably download something similar to this on the internet. What it has is, it says it's its description of the waste. It says the name of the waste, and it says dielectric oil, equipment, and materials contaminated with PCBs. Who's the generator, and it takes the name of the company. It has, for instance, what is the physical chemical composition. It talks about oils, contaminated dielectric oils contaminated with PCBs. It has the weight, the volume, and the PCB concentrations. This is very important for information with respect to the equipment. Now, it's very difficult to go around weighing transformers. And one of the things that I've discovered in the inventories that I've read, and I've read many inventories in my time, is that most of the time the inventories are reported as units of equipment. We have 1,000 units. We have 1,000 transformers, but that doesn't tell us how much do we have in quantitatively. What do we have? How many tons of metal and how many tons of oil need to be processed? So, if you take the kVA, I don't know how you say it in English, the kVA, the voltage, I think it is, how you say it. If you take that number, if it's 10, it's 20, it's I don't know, 50, 60, whatever. There's a small formula that you can use to calculate how much is transformer weight, the metal, and how much is oil, without having to weigh the transformer. This formula can be found in the Basel Convention guidelines that were published, I think, in 2002. It's the one that has to do with transformers and capacitors maintenance. And there you can easily determine, just having the kVA for the unit, you can determine how much that weight in oil and how much that weight in transformer metal will be. And if worse comes to worse, and you only have the weight, the total weight, there's a little rule of thumb that 2 parts metal, 1 part oil. We don't need to have exact amounts quantified, but we do need to have an indication of what is the dimension of the problem. So either you use the formula or you use the other sort of rule of thumb if you have the total weight, and we can probably come down to some good estimations of what we have. And up at the top on the right-hand side, it says serial number and equipment number. Many times it's important for companies to have a generating distribution companies to have good control of their equipment with a serial number from the equipment and also their internal numbering system. the proper temporary storage. Once the equipment has been identified, it has been labeled, it should be stored in a proper storing location. It should be sealed off. It should have a roof. It should be avoided. It should be sealed. Not necessarily does it have to be a cement wall. It can be a chain link fence, but it needs to have proper labeling that inside there is PCB contaminated equipment, that it's dangerous, that it's a possible impact to the health. It should be covered with the roof in order to avoid climate, weather implications, and in the sealing off with some sort of protective material in order to avoid people coming in and possibly wanting to take the metals away or take the oils away for selling or whatever. Here we have some examples. The equipment should have secondary containment, and if not, the warehouse should have secondary containment canals, or canals where if there is a spill or there is a leakage, the oils will go to a special area where they can be contained, a box or whatever, where they can be drained. Okay. And one of the other most important things, so just to backtrack a little bit, we're talking about inventorying, identifying, labeling, proper handling, proper storage once they're identified, and in the database. The information should be recorded somewhere. And in some countries, we can have we have databases that are elaborated, but in other places, with a simple Excel sheet, you can keep track of the serial number. If you have information regarding who the producer of the transformer, if the transformer has been opened or it hasn't been opened. This is important. If the transformer has not been opened and there's a label on it, you can take the information from the label, which will probably tell you if it has PCB content or not. And there's many commercial names for PCBs, Ascarel, different, and this you can find it on within the guidelines that have been provided by the Stockholm Convention and by the Basel Convention. Now, if the transformer has been opened, you need to indicate on your tracking information sheet that it has been opened, because in the labeling, the plaques on it have no validity anymore, because the oil might have been changed, and really there's no way of controlling what happened to the transformer. So all of this information can be kept on an Excel sheet. In the worst case scenario, if that's all you can do, at least you should keep it on an Excel sheet. And on that Excel sheet, you should be able to identify where you have the transformer in use, if it's a transformer that's out of use, where it's stored, and how you follow up on with this little small piece of information, you can follow up on where your PCB contaminated transformers are, and this will help you manage better what any possibilities of confusing and not identifying where you have equipment that is contaminated. This is sort of the format, the number of equipment, the equipment number, the type of equipment. Is it a transformer? Is it a capacitor? Capacitors are sealed. So if the capacitor says it has PCBs on the outside, it probably doesn't. Nothing has been changed inside, because the capacitors are always sealed, and the capacitors need to be opened in order to be able to take samples, and this is a difficult process in many times. What's the year of fabrication, the type of oil, what country it was originally from, is there evidence of it having been opened, does it have drippings, is there an indication there might be leakage, and so on. And thank you. I hope that this has been a small contribution to clarifying some things